Hello everyone. In the videos of this particular section, we are going to talk about promises. Again, this is continuation of our learning from the previous section where we saw JavaScript callbacks.
Hey there. If you're finding this video helpful, you'll love our full online course on JavaScript with node.js. It goes even more in depth and covers everything you need to know. Check out the link in the description to enroll and take your skills to the next level.
In the asynchronous programming, because JavaScript is single-threaded, program cannot wait at a particular point if a block of code is taking more time to execute. It can be, for example, a database query that is taking time to fetch data from database, or it can be a call to a third-party service which is taking time to process and return the response. In all such cases, because JavaScript is single-threaded, we cannot wait. In that case, what JavaScript does is it goes ahead and execute the rest of the program. And whenever we get the response back from, say, a third-party service, it'll go back and process it. Now, the question is, what if we have some portion of code which is dependent on the response that we receive? How to handle such situation? In the previous section, we saw callbacks. Callbacks is one way to handle it. Say we are waiting for a certain response. So JavaScript will wait for the response, and whatever code that we want to execute after we receive the response, we can put it inside the callback function, and then that will get executed. One issue with callbacks that we saw is callback hell. Now, another way of handling asynchronous programming is promises. Okay, promises are a little bit better than callbacks. We'll still use callbacks. In a lot of ways, it's not that we will not use callbacks at all, but promises are better. They have better ways of handling what we want to do when we receive the response. When we are waiting for a particular service to respond, when we are waiting for something to happen, and depending upon what happens, we have a certain amount of code to execute. Like, for example, let's say we have a piece of code as simple as this. Just assume for a second, let's say this is taking time to execute, and this is a third-party service which we are dealing with. It's taking a couple of seconds to respond, and I do not know what is going to be the result of the operation. So it can be successful, it can be an error, and depending upon if it is successful or failure, I want to write different pieces of code. So if I receive the response successfully from the third-party service, I have different line of code to execute. If there is some error, if the response is not satisfactory, I want to write different piece of code. When we want to program in such a way, promises are much better as compared to callback functions. So what promise is saying is, promises in JavaScript represent the eventual result of an asynchronous operation. When we are dealing with asynchronous operation, that can result in basically two ways. One, it might be fulfilled, like whatever we are waiting for, it might happen or it might not happen. So promises provide a way for us to explicitly specify the piece of code, specific functions, when promise is fulfilled or promise is rejected. And what I mean to say by that is, let's say this is the simple code which we are assuming that it's an async code which is going to take time. And in this very first video, we are going to see how to create a simple promise. Very simple. The way we create promise is by using the promise constructor. So we'll begin by creating a constant. Let's call it as promise. You can give it any name. This is just a variable, or this, in this case, constant name. And we'll use the constructor promise. So in the constructor of promise, we can provide the function. In this case, we'll use arrow function, and this particular function has two parameters. It is standard. Okay, just stay with me for now. First parameter is resolve, second is reject. Okay, there are two parameters. So what we have done so far, we created a constant. You can create a variable as well. Then to create the instance, we are using promise constructor. Inside the constructor argument, we are creating this arrow function which has two arguments. One is resolve, another is reject. Now whatever code is async code, we can put over here. So this particular line is not really an async code, but just for example, we are putting it there. So now this is our simple promise. Now over here, if the promise is resolved, it means we are saying we got what we wanted. In that case, we'll use this resolve and we can provide whatever information that we want to provide here. We'll say pass. Okay. So this is the simplest way we can create a promise. What we are saying is create a promise for me. Whatever we want to do, if it is done successfully, resolve the promise. If JavaScript is able to execute this part of code successfully, the promise will be resolved. And when we run this particular code, we'll get hello in the output, which is this part over here. Now, what is the significance of this resolve or reject? And we also have something called as pending over here. So what happens is, assume this particular code is taking some time. It's gonna return the response after a few seconds. So when the promise is created, there are 3 states a promise generally has. First state, when the promise is in progress, that state is called as pending state. We are still awaiting the response. We do not know if it is successful or failed. So that first state is called as pending state. That's the initial state, indicating that promise is still working. Then it can either result in pass or fail. So if the promise is complete without any issue, we call it as fulfilled state, and that fulfilled state is nothing but resolved. Whatever function that we want to execute after a promise is resolved, we can connect it with this resolved state. How to do it? We'll see it in the next session. Just let's understand some concept in this particular first video. If there is some issue, if there is some error in fulfilling the promise, then this reject comes into picture, and whatever code we want to execute, whatever function we want to execute, when promise is not fulfilled, we will connect it with reject state. Okay, how to do it? There are certain methods called as promise.then, promise.catch, and there is interestingly there is also something called as promise.finally, which will execute either ways. If promise is resolved or rejected, we can always use finally to run some piece of code. We'll see these 3 methods in the next session. For now, just understand how to create a promise. We'll always use constructor of the promise to create it. We can begin with some variable or constant. We'll use new promise, and in the argument we'll have this arrow function which has 2 parameters, resolve and reject, and we can have our conditions. We'll see in the next session how to put those conditions, when to resolve the promise, when to reject the promise, and depending upon promise is resolved or rejected, next things happen. So how promise.then, promise.catch and finally work, we'll see it in the next session.
Thanks for watching. If you want to dive deeper into JavaScript with Node.js, don't forget to explore our complete online course. Click the link in the description to get started today. Plus, subscribing to our channel ensures you won't miss out on more valuable content in the future. See you in the class.